So after our plenary session this morning, we'll take a break and ask you to move to your concurrent session D. We'll have lunch from 11:30 to 1:30 in the exhibit hall in the other end of the building. And before we go further, I'll already go forward and thank our lunch sponsors, again, AECOM, Midwest-Vaco, Merck, and the Virginia Port Authority. Please take time for lunch and fellowship, and take time to visit our 49 exhibitors and the Engineers Without Borders table. This is a table that's a tribute to the service spirit of the VMI faculty, staff, and cadets. We received 89 submissions this year in this year's call for papers. 45 of those papers will be presented here at the symposium. We've also incorporated 10 speed presentations into our sessions. For those of you with tickets, the evening will close with the Environment Virginia banquet, which begins here at 5:30 in Marshall Hall. The banquet is sold out. If you plan to attend, please bring your ticket, which was in your registration materials. I would like to congratulate our Commonwealth on the 20th anniversary of the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. We'll be celebrating that milestone with several sessions and opportunities during the symposium. This morning, our first plenary sessions are on the topic of celebrating our success and the future, environmental and energy priorities. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce Ann Jennings, the Virginia Executive Director of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. She's a past winner of the Urchel Award and a longtime supporter of Environment Virginia. So please join me in welcoming Ann Jennings.
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to see all of you here. As nice as the weather is outside, I'm very proud of you for coming here early for this session. I really appreciate this opportunity that VMI has provided me to introduce our speakers this morning, and I say that specifically because it gives me the opportunity to thank both David and Doug on behalf of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. I want to thank both of them for their efforts to encourage the governor as well as the General Assembly to invest over $200 million this past session in water quality improvements. At a time when our economy continues to struggle with its recovery, to invest over $200 million in stormwater, in CSO projects, and wastewater treatment plant upgrades is really, truly remarkable. So I just want to say thank you to them publicly for that. Thank you. So first up is Director Paylor. I don't want to suggest that he's getting long in years, but I did find out in my research for introducing him that he started out at the State Water Control Board even prior to DEQ and prior to its 20 years as a summer intern in 1973. He then came on the staff of the Water Control Board in 1976 as a field biologist and has spent most of his time with the department. However, he was appointed by Governor Warner to serve as the Deputy Secretary of Natural Resources, and then appointed by Governor Kane and reappointed by Governor McDonnell as the Director of DEQ. He spent his life, for the most part, in Virginia, born and raised here. For some strange reason, decided to go out of state for his higher education at Duke and Oregon State University. I do give him some props for taking a one-week wastewater treatment class at Virginia Tech, so we're going to start calling him a Hokie. He enjoys woodworking and canoeing, has a wonderful wife and two fabulous children. And I would say this answer to this question to him, I think, reflects his approach to his work. I asked him what he likes about working at DEQ, and he offered that it's an opportunity to make a difference for the public and Virginia's future, and being associated with a great group of professionals who are always looking to improve. So join me in welcoming Director Paylor.
Thanks, Ann. I was 10 when I started that internship. It is great to be here, and it really is an honor to be here to celebrate DEQ's 20th anniversary. 20 years ago last Monday, yes, on April Fool's Day, we combined 4 agencies into one to create DEQ. The State Water Control Board actually had been formed in 1946 in response to some pollution problems on the lower end of the Shenandoah River. That was well before the 26 years before the Clean Water Act. State Air Pollution Control Board was formed in 1966, which was 4 years before the Clean Air Act. Department of Waste Management at one point was a division of the Health Department, and then was created as a department in '86. And then the Council on the Environment was the other piece that became DEQ. That was initially created in 1972 to create regular reports assessing the state of the environment, conduct public hearings, do long-term planning, and advise the governor. The idea of DEQ was to have more integrated multimedia approach to environmental protection and to create a more efficient delivery system. You heard the term one-stop shopping a lot as we talked about DEQ. But what I want to do for a few minutes today is to look over the last 20 years and see what we've accomplished. A lot of times in the environmental world, what we focus on is the challenges that we have ahead of us and the problems that we have, and we don't really focus on the successes so much. And we'll take some time to do that. I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One of them is that most of us, myself included, tend to be problem solvers, and we look at what is it that we need to fix. And so we focus on that more than where we've come from. The other thing is that challenges make more interesting reading. Incremental progress is boring reading, and so you don't hear about that so much. A fellow named Stephen Johnson had an editorial last November in CNN entitled "We're Living the Dream and We Just Don't Realize It." And in that editorial, he pointed out a couple things that I mentioned, that he also said the problem is that we don't often take the time to take the longer view, that is in terms of decades rather than in terms of the last week. And he points out that in the last 50 years, our population has doubled and poverty's declined 90%, life expectancy is up 40%, infant mortality is down, and so on and so on. As examples of things that we don't, we've lost track of because we haven't taken the long view. So I really don't want to minimize our challenges at all, but I do want to take the long view for a minute. I tell our staff that we're in the business of helping to shape Virginia's future, and today is yesterday's future. So what have we accomplished in the past? Before I do that, I'll just say that the mic is still working? Okay, I'm scared to leave that. Virginia, we're doing it with some headwinds. Population is up like 70% since 1970. We have more challenges. This is a graph. I don't want to go into the details, but since 2007, the number of EPA rules that we oversee has done that, and EPA's funding has done that. We're doing it with fewer staff. Actually, if you go back 20 years, I think this number was well over 1,000. I'm not suggesting that we need 1,000 people to do our job, but we've had to become much more efficient in the process. When DEQ was created, it was created with these goals in mind: to promote pollution prevention, reduce levels of pollutants, timely, consistent quality permits, improve public understanding and participation, perform comprehensive planning and analysis, and effective and efficient use of agency resources. I think you're going to see today that all of these goals pretty much have been met, perhaps with the exception of number 5. We haven't been as focused on that as I wish we could have been. That's one of the things that we're hoping to accomplish at this conference. But in the last 20 years, the air is cleaner. These are the ozone levels since 1979. When I started doing air pollution work in '95, the national standard was around 120 parts per billion, and Richmond was in trouble. Northern Virginia was in more trouble. Since then, the standard has been reduced to 75 parts per billion, and we just about meet it. You always hear that our air quality continues to be bad, but we keep holding ourselves to higher standards. The number of ozone red days at the higher standard is 71% less than it used to be. You used to hear a lot of talk about acid rain, and SO2 is the primary cause of acid rain. EPA instituted a cap-and-trade program. That's what's happened to SO2. You don't hear about acid rain so much anymore. Particulate matter is one of the real problem pollutants for asthma. This is the standard, has been the standard. It's about to drop down to here, but as you can see, PM2.5 concentrations are dropping significantly and are already well below the new improved standard that EPA's got. Our air pollutant emissions are down 40% of all the primary air pollutants since 1980, and so we've made a lot of progress with air. Our waterways are cleaner. I want to read for you something from the Richmond News Leader, October 1963, about the James River. The lower James is as dead as it was in 1947. The river's surface is dull and greasy. Tangled underbrush at the water's edge holds captive dead and dying fish. Here, no aquatic life of any sort survives. Our river is a sewer. The river still lies like a putrescent wound across the landscape of the east of the city. So, our waterways are cleaner than they were. It's good to start with a low standard, right? You know, since when I was in school in 1975, we were just beginning the process of upgrading all of our wastewater treats to secondary wastewater treatment, which meant we were going to go beyond just having a grit chamber and a settling basin to actually having some biological removal and that sort of thing. We've invested, hit the wrong button, sorry. We've invested almost $3 billion in that process, and all of our wastewater facilities across the Commonwealth have secondary treatment. Most of them have tertiary treatment right now. When I was in the mid-'70s, my primary job was to count dead fish. We had 300 or so fish kills a year, most of them as a result of problems at point source discharges. We don't see that anymore. We've invested $750 million in the Water Quality Improvement Fund, which is mainly aimed at nitrogen and phosphorus removal for the Chesapeake Bay cleanup and other things. Nitrogen concentrations have dropped dramatically. We're over 60% of our way towards the Chesapeake Bay goal. If you go back to 95, and so we're making significant progress there. Seeing similar progress with phosphorus. You hear a lot about the impaired waterways list. We've got a big impaired waterways list. Over 1,700 stream segments have been listed as impaired. 60% of those are impaired from bacteria, non-point source runoff usually. But here's what we're seeing across the state. In most of those watersheds, the numbers are improving. We have been able to fully restore 315 waterways and partially restore almost 1,600 waterways, and the green areas on this map indicate restored or partially restored waterways that had previously been listed. We have been able to put 29 streams on our Tier 3 exceptional waters list. Most of these are in publicly owned lands. They are exceptional waters that have a higher level of protection than our other waterways do. This is one that is near and dear to me because in 2002, we had the worst drought since the 30s, and I had the distinction of being the drought coordinator. Somebody said it really didn't need to be coordinated. It was doing pretty well on its own. But we had a real problem. We had localities with actual or imminent water supply failures in about 7 places. One, the town of Orange was 24 hours from complete failure of their water system with the kidney dialysis unit in town, and then Tropical Storm Isidore showed up. And the town of wherever Longwood is. Wait, that's my age showing. Yeah, well, I was 10 when I was in the Appomattox River. They actually had to go out and have a flexible intake pipe in the Appomattox River because there was not enough water for a stationary intake to get enough water to get them through the weekend. Farmville. So, and we actually put a siphon over the Holiday Lake Dam to get some flow in the Appomattox River so they could have their they could continue to have water. So, and there was in the state no comprehensive statewide water supply planning process at all. And we took about 2.5 years and developed a process so that we actually have 47 regions of the state and a few other jurisdictions who have now done some comprehensive water supply planning. They're being reviewed right now, should be finalized this year. And those water supply plans, for the first time, will call on localities to have plans for drought response, to have plans for water reuse, to have plans for conservation. And I think that's a big step. All up and down the East Coast, we're seeing that where we used to assume that we had plenty of water, we're having more problems. And so that's a big change. Some of you will remember that that in the late 90s there was an event called the Tulloch decision. Federal court limited the jurisdiction of the Army Corps of Engineers in wetlands activities, and as a result, in very short order, we began to lose thousands of acres of wetlands to draining. So in 2000, we passed a state wetlands law that gave the state jurisdiction over some activities that the federal government doesn't have, and as a result, we have in most cases reversed wetlands loss. Whenever there are impacts on wetlands, we get at least a 2-to-1 replacement of the wetlands that are lost. A little known fact is that some of our monies can be used for land preservation. One that we're particularly proud of is in Northern Virginia. Crow's Nest is probably the last large tract of untrammeled land in that part of the state, and we were able to be a part of helping the locality to secure that property and protect it. Our lands are cleaner than they were. Back in the late 80s, we began to realize that eventually all underground storage tanks are going to leak because we haven't cathodically protected them, and so a huge effort was put in play to identify those leaking tanks, to get them out of the ground, and to get cathodic protection and secondary containment and things like that into our standard design criteria. In 1993, we were getting almost 1,500 actual releases reported a year. We were responding to them. We were having to clean them up. Today, and this is for gas stations, this is commercial, this is not home heating oil, we're only seeing about 163. So we went from environmental epidemic where folks with nearby wells were having contaminated water, we had to deal with that, all of those kinds of things, to this is pretty much under control, and the design criteria now are such that if there is a leak, we will become aware of it much sooner. We have helped to restore 3,400 acres of contaminated sites. These are sites that were not otherwise regulated under RCRA or some other rule, and landowners came to us and said, let's work together. to come up with a cleanup plan and get those acres back into economic productivity. We have cleaned up over 100 hazardous waste sites where they were in fact regulated and there was contamination. We have eliminated the human health exposure concerns, and groundwater migration is under control. I don't have a slide for this, but in the solid waste arena, several decades ago, just about every county had their own landfill. Just about every county's landfill was online. We have gone through a process of identifying the risks associated with those landfills. They're almost all closed out, and the only ones left that aren't closed out are the low risk sites, and they'll be closed out by 2020. We have a really great recycling rate. Back in 1991, our recycling rate was under 20%. Our recycling rate now is over 43%. And if you are somebody who looks at those kinds of numbers and compares our number to, say, Maryland or California or something like that, you're not always comparing apples to apples. We have a very conservative definition of recycling that, in fact, doesn't include things like waste to energy, which some other states include. So we've really made huge progress in our recycling. Some of you may remember, if you were an intern when you were 10 like me, then you'll remember that there was a tire fire in the Northern Valley, and those tires burned for weeks, and liquid got into the receiving streams, and it was just terrible. And most recently, maybe about 10 years ago, we had a pretty bad tire fire in the Roanoke area. But we have had a process where we have identified these tire piles. In fact, you're now paying 50 cents a used tire. You used to pay $1 a used tire, and that money went towards cleanup. At one point, at the worst of it, we had identified about 1,300 illegal tire piles, and we have used those dollars to, one, create a secondary beneficial use market for tires, and two, to eliminate those tire piles. We're now down in the range of 100 tire piles remaining, most of them small and not a big risk. So that's an environmental problem that has essentially been remedied at this point. We do put some federal dollars primarily into helping to, have greater public access. We're spending a lot of effort with local governments on helping them to develop living shorelines, which are a lot more effective at dissipating energy, wave energy, than riprap is. As many of you know, the Eastern Shore is a fairly significant flyway for birds, and we've had a lot to do with preserving some of those, having some feeding, helping to have some feeding stopovers, as well as a lot of work with oyster restoration as well. Yes, we do have an enforcement effort, and this is the way our enforcement dollars have broken out since I think it's about 2004, and most of these dollars go into a fund called the Virginia Emergency Response Fund. It's used to help us respond immediately to emergencies when we need to. It is also money that that goes to pay our obligations towards Superfund cleanups. We have a fairly significant effort with voluntary environmental programs. This is the Green Virginia is the tourist industry. We've got over 1,300 businesses that have worked with us for with some of the criteria to have some more sustainable practices, especially the hotel industry, and that's really taken off. In the business sector, we have over 600 facilities that have developed environmental management systems. And in those facilities, you can see these kinds of results, 99% less hazardous waste disposed of, 30% less hazardous materials used, 19% more recycled water, and so many facilities are stepping up to the plate to go beyond what's required in the rules. So that's not everything, but that's a quick run through of some of the highlights of progress that we've made in the last 20 years for some of these reasons. And this is why we do it. This is Caleb. We do it for Caleb. Actually, his mom says that he's very well aware of the fact that we do it for Caleb. But it's for future generations. I want to just take a second and talk about what I think maybe some of our challenges in the future are. I'm not going to. I think we see challenges in two areas. One of them is maybe just sort of the technical, the environmental challenges, and then I think we have some significant process challenges as well. Under the technical challenges area, I'll just mention a couple. I talked about water supply before. The riparian doctrine is sort of built into our DNA. We have grown up in the eastern part of the country understanding and believing that we're always going to have more supply available to us than we're going to need. But that's actually, we got a lot more people, as I told you earlier, and that's not holding true so much anymore. Our coastal aquifers are fully or maybe over-allocated. We can't continue to use those aquifers and just continue to increase our withdrawal, so we're going to have to find an alternative. And stream flows are actually decreasing as we look at our 7Q10, if you know that term, low flow. They're actually decreasing over time, and we think that's because of more withdrawals. There's sea level rise. A couple of things that get missed in sea level rise is, one, it's exacerbated by land subsidence, which is exacerbated by groundwater withdrawal. The other thing that I just recently learned, there's some evidence that maybe as much as 30% of the sea level rise that we see is a result of groundwater extraction and taking it out of the ground and putting it on the surface again. There are other things, the terms invasive species, endocrine disruptors. We've got big energy demand and energy extraction issues that we're going to have to deal with, habitat loss, biological diversity. And although we're seeing a lot of progress with the Bay, getting to where we need to be with the Bay is going to be pretty daunting, just to mention a few. But the other thing that I want to talk about just briefly is what I think are some process challenges that we've got going forward. And if you were here for the Dr. Johansson's talk yesterday about how the future is going to change and how the way we do business is going to have to change, I think that is really one of the process issues that we've got to face as a country for the environment as well. And I put it in two categories. I think we need to focus on results, and we need to focus on partnership. And under the results category, I would just point out the fact that we've got federal statutes that are 40 years old, and they were developed for problems that aren't the same problems that we have today. And I understand absolutely the challenge, the difficulty, maybe even the impossibility of reworking our federal statutes in the sort of the toxic political environment that we've got right now. But I also think the fact that we continue to use those statutes is one of the things that's making the environment more toxic. And so it's just it doesn't change the fact that I believe the statutes need to be reworked. I think we have an over-reliance on a hierarchical one-size-fits-all regulation process, and I would refer you back to that chart that I showed you with the number of rules that we have coming from the federal government. I think the regulatory process is absolutely critical, and I don't mean to say that we don't need a regulatory process. All of the success that you've seen me point to has come from that, but I think you reach a law of diminishing returns. I think we've gotten the low-hanging fruit. There's an effort called Breaking the Log Jam that you're going to hear from some folks this afternoon about, and I want to, and its focus is this, and how do we need to rethink the way we manage our environmental our environmental programs in the future. And I'd like to read you one quote from there. It says, "Hierarchical regulation, when overused, brings sharply diminishing returns, crimps society more than necessary to stop antisocial conduct, and thus spurs resistance and undercuts its own moral legitimacy." And I would submit that part of the animosity that you're seeing towards EPA these days comes from the fact that they're using statutes that are 40 years old. One-size-fits-all regulation is sometimes much less efficient and effective, and I always like to talk about the international paper example in Franklin, where as an alternative to EPA's one-size-fits-all air toxics rules, they were given the opportunity to come up with a site-specific solution. Their site-specific solution got 50% better environmental results at 30% less cost. I think the beauty of environmental management systems and ISO 14000 is that it allows folks to develop effective on-site opportunities, perhaps with less cost, but maybe even more than that, it gives the members of that community a sense of responsibility and ownership of the outcomes. And so I think that's what we try to accomplish in the Environmental Excellence Act, to create some incentives for folks to go beyond compliance. I think we need smarter government tools. EPA is talking about those kinds of things with the development of the Green Book, which is the National Academy of Sciences put it together for them. It's focused on sustainability issues, but I continue to be concerned that efforts like that will continue to be frustrated by the fairly rigid rules that are laid out in our federal statutes, and we need to find a way within those statutes to allow for some of these outsized environmental results. And then the other thing I'd talk about is partnership. We talk a lot about the Virginia Way. It's worked a lot for us. When I say the Virginia Way, I mean partnership. I mean we have everyone at the table. We attempt to avoid disenfranchisement. We attempt to find solutions. If you noticed our 20th anniversary logo, it's solutions is one of the words in the logo. The reason for that is I tell our folks we don't want to jump to the easy no. We want to get to the hard yes. We want to figure out how can we meet our environmental goals and also be responsive to the other goals of transportation, business, education, whatever the other legitimate goals of society are as well. Another quote from Breaking the Logjam: "Our malady of obsolescent statutes is that the statutes often ignore trade-offs between environmental protection and other goals. The statutes enacted in the 70s generally told agencies to protect health without regard to cost or to reduce pollution as much as feasible without regard to environmental benefit. And whether they should, they cannot." And that's one of the challenges that EPA has in standard setting and other things. They are instructed not to look at cost, and that becomes more of a challenge. Partnership, I believe, can create better solutions, and I would point to the SO2 results. The cap and trade system that was established there was out of the box thinking at the time, created some outsized results that were pretty significant. But to wrap back, to loop back to our successes, if you look at the last 40 years, we have achieved a great deal. And I think that's the reason that we can be hopeful about the future. The problems that we've got are solvable. The public is much more aware of what it requires what's required for sustainability, the importance of sustainability than they were. Public's better educated. We have more tools than we had before. And those are assets that we didn't have back in 1962 when Solid Spring came out, and we became aware for the first time of the potential we had to harm the environment, and that we had to do something about it. we've done a lot about it in the last 40 years. And when I look at that progress, it makes me hopeful for the future. One of the things that we want to talk about at this conference, Envisioning the Future, is to have a discussion about what are some of the things that we need to be aware of as we move forward, to make sure that 20 years from now we can look back and have charts that look even better than this. So I thank you for your attention, and I don't know if we'll have time for questions, but if we do, I'll be happy to take them later. Thank you. Excuse me. Oh, I just walked off with that. I'll give it to him. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, David. A lot of very encouraging information. I think it shows what we can accomplish when Virginia's citizens, private businesses, our government, the state and federal, work together. We have made some incredible accomplishments. There's a lot of challenges to remain, but continuing that effort to work together, there is a great opportunity, from our perspective, a real great opportunity to reach the end goal with restoring the Chesapeake Bay. So I appreciate your remarks, David. I have the pleasure to introduce our second speaker. He has specifically asked that I be briefer rather than longer, so I'll honor that request and offer just a few bits of information about him. Mr. Domenech was appointed by Governor McDonnell in January of 2010 to serve as our Secretary of Natural Resources. In that role, he oversees 6 state agencies. He, unlike David, chose to go to higher education, attend higher education here in the Commonwealth, and he is a graduate of Virginia Tech in forestry and wildlife management. And I understand his wife is also a forester from Virginia Tech. Prior to serving as our secretary, he has a long-standing career in natural resources, including a position in the Department of the Interior under the Bush administration. He grew up as a military kid, so like most of us, spent his time in a variety of different states, also lived in the Dominican Republic and Panama, but went to high school here in Richmond, and as I said, went on to Virginia Tech from there. He tells me he has a fabulous wife and 4 awesome adult children, so please join me in welcoming Secretary Domenech.
Well, good morning, everyone. Actually, some of that I told her not to say, so I've learned many things about Ann, and anyway, no, I do appreciate that lead-in that David just gave, and I'm going to quickly run through a few slides with you about sort of where do we go from here. And he referenced yesterday the presentation by Robert Johansson. I don't know how many of you were here for that. Relatively scary presentation, but I learned, he told us yesterday that we needed to start thinking about the unthinkable. And I think that's sort of the basis of where we're heading today. He also told us that only 17-year-olds and less will change the world. So thank you very much. Apparently all of us can leave. But I worked for a guy once that gave me great advice, and it was that youth and exuberance can always be overcome by old age and treachery. So I take that to heart today, and we... I am old enough? No, apparently. I turned something off I wasn't supposed to. Actually, it says on. No. I'll just stay here. It's perfectly fine. Technology, see? So that, I wouldn't really even need that if I had my Google Glass on, but one thing that did strike me in the presentation yesterday is that no Google Glass is going to replace hardworking hands on the ground. And I think that's what we sort of represent. The people who work for us represent hard-working hands on the ground trying to make environmental improvements. And this morning at a small breakfast that Colonel Olson held, he made the comment that Google Glass will not replace soldiers in the field. And so there is a role for us who are going to work in the real world, and I think that's worthwhile. So I do want to do some thinking about the unthinkable, and I want to encourage everyone to put on their Google Glass, and let's talk about the future for a second. When DEQ was initially put together in 1993, it had several aspects of the program, including air, water, waste, and the environment, Council on the Environment, and part of their role was to look at long-range planning. And you might ask yourself in that process a simple question, or maybe it's not so much a simple question, is what environmental and energy issues, if not adequately addressed, will be of greatest concern to you and your constituency in the next 30 to 50 years? And you really can't answer that, I don't know where I'm supposed to point, all right, without stakeholder input. So that's sort of how we started this process. The process is already underway to answer that question. And DEQ, David, and others went out and talked to some business and industries, some local governments, some key individuals, nonprofits, in some preliminary interviews with stakeholders. And the result was building essentially a composite futures list of likely priorities. And this future list is actually being submitted to you, to the attendees of Environment Virginia, for your further input. And you might ask input, how are you going to do this? And there are really two ways that we want to get your input. First, during some breakout sessions, and second, with an electronic survey. And so I want to talk about both of those just briefly. The breakout sessions have been included in your schedule, and if you have a chance to look at that, this is what you're going to see. Yesterday, we had breakout sessions on this futures idea, on energy supply, on non-point water quality, and on water supply, the item that David just talked about. Today, there are going to be breakout sessions on this futures idea, looking at land redevelopment, waste, aging infrastructure. There'll be another one on the impacts on air, water, land preservation, and planning, and then we'll have one on climate trends. Also, we're going to talk about next generation regulatory framework with an introduction today, and then tomorrow we're going to talk specifically about Virginia in panel discussions. And, of course, David talked about the Virginia Way. That's not secession. It's a collaborative exchange, and that's really what we're after here, is to build a database of ideas, frankly, from you all who are the environmental thinkers and leaders in the Commonwealth. We're going to record these results. There'll be scribes in each of the breakout sessions, and we're going to compile those discussions and post them on VMI and DEQ's websites. And I'll talk more about the result in a second. The second, besides what we're doing here in the breakout sessions, the second way you can provide input to us is through an electronic survey. So if you've got an outdated tablet or iPhone, here are some instructions. Starting at 9:30 today, you will have the opportunity to fill out a survey. It's like American Idol. Voting doesn't start yet. So 9:30, you can vote for 6. Anyway, I guess you guys don't watch American Idol anyway. You may have already received an email from us with an active link to the survey location. If you didn't, there's actually the address. And if you don't have any way to access the internet, for those of you who are not always on the internet apparently, you can go to the second floor here, and there's a polling booth, and you can actually take the survey up there. Here's an example of what you might see when you go there, asking you how important climate issues are to you, an ability to rank that, and then to talk about some sub-issues that are important to you. We're going to compile those results. We have from the Survey Monkey, which is the computer program that does this, tonight. And the readout of those results will be presented at the luncheon tomorrow. And the question is, okay, did I not? There we go. So the question is, what will happen then? And what we're going to try to do is communicate the results of those interviews and what you tell us to all of our natural resources agencies and to other secretariats in the government. We're going to be encouraging folks to incorporate the results in their long-range planning, and we're going to encourage non-governmental groups and individuals to continue to communicate with us about your concerns, to take appropriate action as you see fit on those future issues, participate in cooperative public-private efforts, and to assist the agencies and VMI and others in continuing the dialogue. I'll tell you what we're not going to do. We're not going to produce a report, because we have found that reports generally, you might glance at it for a second and then it goes on your shelf. So that's what we're not going to do in a formal plan sense, but essentially try to help facilitate a discussion that leads us all into that envisioning the future. There we go. So again, we're encouraging all parties to work with us and focusing on common priorities for the future, understanding that each person and agency and organization can contribute to effective resolution of the priorities and in ways that they deem suitable for their individual needs and resources. As they say, we cannot address the future if we've not first envisioned it, and so we want to thank you up front for helping us envision that future. So as David says, some conference in the future can look back at the charts he just showed you to show that we are continuing to make great progress on the environment. And I do want to just take a moment here as I wrap up to take a moment or two to do a special, take my prerogative, since I own the lectern at the moment, to make a small thank you presentation to Maureen Matson. Now, is Maureen in the room? Oh, there she is. Maureen, can you please come up here a second? Many of you may not know that this is Maureen Matson's last week in my office, and she really does.
Know he was going to do
she really does hate this stuff. And Maureen has been hard for me to say the number of jobs I have given her to do. In fact, I was reflecting on looking at some articles about Margaret Thatcher's passing, and I went to one site last night and saw a great quote. They had a list of quotes from Margaret Thatcher, and one of her quotes in 1965 was, if you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman. So I have asked Maureen to do many things in our office. In addition to being the Deputy Secretary of Natural Resources, she is served as the governor's senior energy advisor, looking at all the policy issues related to transmission, to new sources, nuclear, offshore wind, offshore oil and gas. David mentioned being the drought czar. Actually, for us, Maureen was the drought czar, or czaress. No drought. We solved that, check.
Right.
She also managed all of our executive review of regulations in the department, advising the governor on those things, and she frankly has served as my in-house lawyer. And we are actually having a little personal goodbye later in the week, but with her colleagues here, I just wanted to take a moment publicly to thank her for all of her work, and I hope you give her a round of applause. Stay there. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. I have filled my favorite bag from Wetlands Solutions with a few items here. I won't pull them out, but Maureen is going to work as the general counsel at Christopher Newport University. Some of you may not realize that she actually served as, when she was at the Attorney General's office, as principal counsel here for VMI. So I have put in this bag a T-shirt from VMI. I have put a bag of chocolate goodies for the top of her desk, now that she'll be in the university setting, and a bottle of wine for in the drawer at the university. So,
Thank you.
I love
Thank
sweetie.
you. I'm going to miss
Stay
you.
right here,
Why am I staying here?
because there's more.
Oh, Lord.
And the surprises just keep coming. The Secretary mentioned that Maureen has been a very special part of VMI for a number of years. She and I had a wonderful opportunity to chat last night, time we haven't been able to take for a long time. We're really going to miss you. You've been involved in some of the most pivotal decisions at this institute. I told Maureen last night, but I'd like to say it in front of everyone. General P couldn't be here this morning. He had other obligations, but he asked me to pass along his personal and very heartfelt thanks to you for all of the work you've done for not only him, but for the faculty, the staff, and the Corps of Cadets. So we have a small gift as well. We expect to see you out on the nature hike, fully adorned in VMI regalia. So on behalf of General P and all the rest of us, thank you so much. Give me a hug.
Thank
Would you like to say a few things?
I'll try.
Go ahead.
One of the reasons I really hate these celebrations is because I get very emotional. So I'm going to try to say a few words, but we'll see how it goes. I can't express to you really the honor and privilege, and people use those words a lot, but I mean them. The honor and privilege that it's been to serve the Commonwealth in this role as Deputy Secretary of Natural Resources. I really came into the job thinking about the energy piece of what I was doing, and that was a large part of my responsibility, but I didn't anticipate how truly rewarding it was going to be to work with our 6 natural resources agencies, and what exceptional public servants you all have working for you in those agencies. And it's just been a real pleasure and an honor to work with those folks to facilitate their success. And if in some small way we have made Virginia and left Virginia better than it was when we found it, then we have succeeded. And I just want to say thank you to every one of you for helping us do that.
These are bittersweet moments. I do want to thank Secretary Dominich and Mr. Paylor and Ann for a wonderful session this morning. Just a very few quick housekeeping remarks. I would like to remind you, please do take a few minutes to participate in the survey. The station on board is in the second floor lounge. You can ask any one of the staff and they'll direct you there. Please do take the survey. If you'd like to participate in the floor walk on the Beck campus and see Maureen and all of her VMI regalia, please meet at the shuttle stop in the Marshall Hall parking lot. We recommend that you bring water. It's going to be up to upwards of 90 degrees today, sunscreen, and a hat. If you would now move to the concurrent session of your choice and have a wonderful day today. Thank you.